Community justice is programs that set up to deal with offenders once they've gone through the legal system, been sentenced in court, and they're either gone to jail or prison and then back out in the communities. And we help that transition back from when they've been incarcerated or they've been in trouble with the legal system. We help that integration back into the community. So our probation officers, for example, they would watch the individuals within the community. They have them checking in here. They do home visits. They help them with employment, help them get into treatment with drugs and alcohol or anger management, variety of, depending on what their needs are. We follow the court mandates. So if the judge orders them to complete treatment and go to a certain amount of classes or whatever it is that they've determined is necessary to go consistent with their sentence, and we monitor that and make sure that those things are being completed.
The sex offender unit, we use it's called a containment model. There's 3 different prongs to the containment model. There's the PO, there's the treatment provider, and then there's the polygraph examiners. We also use a collaborative effort with all the other partnering agencies, with Medford Police Department, with the Sheriff's Office, with Central Point Police Department, Ashland Police Department, Phoenix, and Talent. And we typically meet with those folks once a month in our network meeting, and we collaborate on case plans, how to deploy different strategies on supervising these folks while they're in the community. They're really difficult sometimes to supervise, especially when they have really highly manipulative types of tendencies. And so we want to make sure that we have as many people watching the folks that are under our supervision as possible to prevent recidivism.
We have multiple assessments that we use, 3 different assessments to determine what their actual risk level is currently. And then we continue updating that. One of the assessments can be updated every time the PO meets with the offender to see if their risk has increased or decreased. So that's our starting point, making sure we know which cases are high and medium primarily, because those are the people we have to put our resources on and focus our treatment money, subsidy money for polygraph testing, and that has to be the main focus. We still work with the low-level offenders. We certainly offer them treatment and refer them whenever possible, but when the rubber hits the road, we have to go with our high and medium offenders.
In general, I think it's probably a difficult piece of the system that a lot of people don't always understand with community corrections. Our role in the system is we wear many different hats as a probation officer, and so at one point there may be, you've got the law enforcement on one end who are arresting them prior to the crime and keeping the community safe on that end, and then the courts and the DAs who are prosecuting the cases. Then they go to the correction system, which will incarcerate them and they serve their punishment, so to speak, in that area. And then they come out to us. And so our role is to sometimes be an enforcement officer if they're violating and we have to arrest them and put them back in jail. But at the same time, we could be also functioning more as a counselor or as a mentor for folks that are back in the community. We help that integration by putting them in the proper classes and make sure that their time is structured, teach them to do things that a lot of times they haven't learned in the rest of their life. Just simple, money management, or they're mentoring their schedules and making sure that they're doing the things that successful people within the community have been doing, normal citizens. And so we gear a lot of our programs just to give some of those basic life skills.
As a professional, just knowing a little bit about people and what makes them tick, and kind of just doling out a little bit at a time things that they can manage. So for instance, if someone comes out of prison and they've been down for 1 year, 4 years, they've got no place to live. Maybe they have a parent or a relative or an old girlfriend, but really and truly they have no place to live. They have no clothes, they have no toiletries. So you start out with the basics and get them their basic needs, because if you can't provide them basic needs, why would that person listen to you in the first place?
The way the process works is they come in for the assessment. We develop a case plan based on what they did as a crime, what their needs are currently, whether or not they're in denial of the crime, if they have enabling types of resources that are out there. Maybe it's a family member that is enabling, or maybe they're supportive in their treatment. We want to take all these things into consideration before we deploy a case plan.
There's the whole fear factor with sex offenders in the community, which makes it definitely a more involved caseload. We get a lot of phone calls. People are worried about their neighbor or somebody they saw on our website, for example, and there's a lot of fear surrounding it, and people don't really understand that usually it's somebody they know who's the offender. It's not necessarily going to be someone hiding behind the bush. Granted, we have a few of those, but for the most part, one of the best quotes I've heard, Katie Gotch, she's a treatment provider that works up north, and we've learned a lot from her. She talks about you're more likely to see an offender sitting around at your Thanksgiving dinner table than walking down the bike path and hiding behind a bush.
There's a lot more analysis being done on what works and what doesn't work. So, for example, evidence-based programs are required, which shows some kind of testing and procedures that show that these programs are effective, the ones that we're using, the strategies that we're using, that they're effective with the populations. And so we gear our treatment and a lot of our methods around what has worked on a large population that's been tested, so the profession has come a long way in refining those things that don't work, and we get away from those. And so we spend that money to go after programs that we know are going to be successful, or at least have a certain degree of success.
We've enjoyed typically in Jackson County a less than 1% recidivism rate of the sex offenders that we supervise, and I think it's attributed to our three-prong approach with the PO, the polygraph examiners, and the extensive treatment that they're required to do.
I don't mind at all when someone comes in from prison and they're angry and upset and why do they have to do this and why do they have to do that? That's great. I get to work with them and try to get them, try to turn their opinion around about, what exactly it is that's being asked of them and what are the benefits if they comply with it.
A lot of times we find out through treatment that they've done these things multiple times, the sex offenses. And for whatever reason, even though they're reported, nobody followed up on it. And there's several different cases that could have been followed up on that if they would have found the level of deviance that we find with them for the crimes that they already committed. I heard a statistic the other day by one of our treatment providers that on average there's been 140 offenses prior to a sex offender being caught that they never got caught for or convicted for in the past.
When they're doing some of these job programs, they've never had some of those successes in life. Some of them haven't been anywhere except, in the system, in and out of the system, whole lives, in and out of jail. Some of them never even they can be in their, mid-40s and never had a real job in their lives. They've always just gone from incarceration cycle to incarceration cycle with no in-between. And so when they learn to have some successes in these areas, it's just a self-esteem builder that it's just amazing to watch how it affects them.
It's a really noble cause to be in this profession, and it is something that weighs heavy on my heart because I've seen some things that are pretty dark, and anyhow, it's something that I think everybody needs to be aware of. We all don't need to be exposed to all the details of the darkness, but I do think that there's a level of exposure that needs to happen in the community to understand what the depths of people's deception are, what the depths of their criminality is, and it's something that people need to understand.
I've never been burned out. I've always enjoyed the work with clients. I just want to see them do well and improve. And early on, I had to learn that it was small success, not necessarily they're going to become a pro-social person who is never going to get in trouble again, or not use drugs again, or not look at pornography again. You really have to focus on the small things, and I just enjoy talking with people and learning about what they have to say and see what I can do to help steer them in a better direction.
I really like working with people. I've always felt, even as a kid, dreaming about what am I going to do when I grow up. And I always think about being a school teacher or a guidance counselor. So I'm not a school teacher, nor am I a guidance counselor in the terms of the academic system. However, I do teach and I do guide. And so I just think it's something I've always really just kind of wanted to do.